They think I'm crazy. Maybe they're right. But after what I saw in the Weddell Sea, I can no longer pretend that the Leviathan is just a legend. That sound, the dull echo reverberating through the ship's walls, like a distant roar coming from the abyss, still echoes in my mind, hammering relentlessly. It all started when we went to investigate a signal, something the sonar referred to as unidentified activity. At first it seemed like just another fleeting anomaly, a glitch in the equipment, or perhaps a common movement of schools of fish or submerged icebergs. But as we got closer to the source of the signal, the intensity grew and the mystery deepened. Navigation became more difficult. The ice seemed to move in strange ways, as if it had a will of its own. It was as if the Weddell Sea was alive, breathing in a slow, heavy rhythm, a presence that couldn't be explained by any formula of physics or meteorology. The sound grew louder, and that's when the first sighting appeared. A gigantic shadow passed under the hull of the ship. It wasn't an iceberg, it wasn't a whale. It was something immense, something that shouldn't exist. The waters stirred as if the creature was merely testing our presence. In a reflex, I saw through the window of my station, something moving toward the depths, something with tentacles stretching and undulating with a terrifying grace. Everyone on the crew fell silent. Doubt took hold of us. How do you explain the inexplicable? How do you justify the presence of a creature or something even older and stranger in the heart of the Antarctic Ocean? I was called crazy when I tried to talk about what I saw. They said fatigue and isolation might have messed with my mind, but I know what I saw. And as the days drag on and the echo from the depths intensifies, I know we are being watched. Something waits, something sleeps, but it won't be easily forgotten. They think I'm crazy. Maybe they're right. But after everything I've witnessed, the truth is even more terrifying than any madness. The vessel Trident set sail at dawn. The sky, tinged with a pale blue, reflected on the water like a mirror, and the sea was too calm, as if the ocean itself were holding its breath, waiting for something. The breeze was light, but the atmosphere felt dense, almost oppressive, as if the vastness of the world were waiting for a secret to be revealed. The first minutes of navigation were peaceful. The waves, almost imperceptible, stretched as far as the eye could see. But there was something there, something in the air. The silence that surrounded the vessel was not normal. There were no bird sounds nor the usual murmur of the sea. Only the constant hum of the engine and soon after, an unbearable crackling on the radio. The communicator emitted words without origin, distorted, which sounded more like a lost message, a warning from a world beyond our understanding. The crew's eyes met, aware that something was wrong. But no one spoke. No one dared to break the silence. The captain, with a tense expression, kept his gaze fixed ahead, but his hands, firm on the wheel, betrayed his growing anxiety. And then, on the horizon, something moved. At first, it seemed like just an optical illusion, a distortion caused by the vastness of the sea. But as we drew closer, the shape became clearer, too large, too alive. Something that rose from the water with an immensity that defied all logic. It was as if the sea had given birth to something from its depths, a creature or structure that couldn't exist. Or perhaps it was just a construct of our minds, trying to comprehend the incomprehensible. The outlines were indistinct, as if the horizon itself were being distorted by a power beyond reason. The shadows that moved slowly, with a terrifying grace, seemed to crawl toward the Trident, but without haste, as if they were watching us, evaluating us. The radio crackled again, words that made no sense, and the temperature suddenly dropped. The atmosphere grew heavy, and even the air seemed denser, as if the sea was about to rebel. "Captain, what is that?" The question echoed softly, but no one had the courage to answer it. Everyone knew there was no answer. What lay before us was not something that reason or science could explain. The creature, or whatever it was, continued moving as the vessel advanced. Something very old, something that perhaps we were never meant to see. And the sea, this calm and treacherous sea, now seemed to be watching us back, waiting, perhaps, for us to make the right choice. But it was already too late. I was told that the ancients already spoke of it. They called it the first beast, an entity forgotten by time, a primordial force that existed even before history began. A being that sleeps beneath the abyssal trenches in the most unfathomable depths since the world was still young and the seas had not yet been touched by the hand of man. It does not breathe like us, nor die like fish. Its body, if we can even call it that, is an amorphous mass without a defined shape, a walking abyss. They say it is not made of flesh or bone, but of something older and incomprehensible, a substance that exists outside of human understanding. It does not need oxygen nor food. Its existence is a paradox, a truth silenced by the layers of time, a specter that resurfaces in the whispers of the tides. The legends are clear on one point. The beast is merely waiting. It sleeps, but its sleep is not peaceful. It is the nightmare of the depths, the origin of the shadows and the dark waters. It is not known exactly what it desires or why it waits, but the stories that have survived through the centuries say that it is in a type of eternal vigil. The elders spoke of how if the sea grew too quiet, if the waters stopped moving, it was a sign that it was awakening. The people who lived on the most remote coasts, far from curious eyes, would whisper what they saw during storms with no explanation or inexplicable phenomena. The sea, as if answering the beast's call, would become wild, agitated in an unusual way. There was something else in the waves, something deeper than any known ocean, a presence stretching like a shadow, lurking near boats and ships, watching with eyes that had never been seen but were always felt. No one has ever seen the beast, but everyone feels its presence on the deepest nights, when the silence of the ocean becomes unbearable and the stars can barely light the horizon. The currents change, the winds fall silent, and for a brief moment, the world seems to stop, as if the earth were holding its breath. They say it is not a god, nor a monster, but something older and more distant, an echo of a time that could never be revived. A time before the first trees, before the evolution of life as we know it. Perhaps it is the first guardian of Earth, or a primordial spirit that survived the birth of the planet. And, if what they say is true, whatever it is merely waiting for the right moment to rise again from the depths, to awaken. I don't know if this is real, or just another story born from human fear. But as I listen to the winds over the sea, and watch how the waters stir for no reason, I feel that the legend might be more than simple superstition. Something is below, waiting. In 1623, sailors returned from an expedition that no one should have ever undertaken. The ship Perseverance arrived on the coast, but it did not bring the joy expected by the crew anxiously waiting. When the first man stepped off the ship, his face was a pale, lifeless mask. His eyes were empty, as if his very spirit had been ripped from his body. His steps were slow, as if each one required a titanic effort, and when his voice was finally heard, it was broken, a shadow of a human sound. He did not speak much. He only murmured repeatedly the same words. He opened the eye, and the most disturbing part of all, it wasn't just him. Every sailor who disembarked afterward, every man who had been on that journey, seemed to have been touched by the same madness. Their eyes were hollow, devoid of any trace of life or understanding. Their bodies were there, but their minds had been lost in the depths of an abyss where reality no longer held sway. They spoke of nothing but this. He opened the eye. But what did it mean? No one knew. No one dared to ask more, for the answer seemed worse than silence. The town's doctors tried to help them, but there was no cure for it. There were no words that could explain the emptiness in those men's eyes, nor gestures that could ease the pain they carried. It seemed they were bearing a terrible secret, one that even madness could not conceal. No one believed, of course. No one wanted to believe. The idea that something could have been capable of destroying the human mind so completely seemed absurd. The ocean, with all its vastness and mystery, had always been a place of legends and myths. Stories of monsters and spirits in the waters were common, but how could the sailors speak of something that even the legends had not dared to describe? Something that tore sanity away, that caused a man to lose himself, not just physically, but spiritually, before the gaze of something. Weeks passed, and the town tried to follow its routine. But those who had heard the story or seen the vacant gaze of the sailors could not forget. The word "I" took over conversations, rumors, sleepless nights. Fear began to grow, subtle and silent, like a shadow stretching out. And then the other sailors began to disappear. One by one, the houses of the men who had returned from that expedition were found empty. No one saw them again. They didn't leave. They left no trace of their departure. They simply vanished, as if they had been swallowed by the earth or the sea, or perhaps by the very gaze of him, the being who, according to the words of their former companions, had opened the eyes. In 1623, the sailors returned with empty eyes, and the town, over time, decided to erase what had happened. But there was something more, something that persisted in the minds of the more attentive in the darkest nights, when the sea whispered on the town's shores, the fear that perhaps the eye they had seen, the eye of an unfathomable and immortal thing, had never closed. Captain Graves, in 1797, wrote about a creature that made the sky tremble and the sea retreat. His words, already aged by time, were recorded with a desperate urgency, as if the very act of writing was an effort against what he knew to be inevitable. The pages were stained, and the letters dragged on in a trembling handwriting. But his message was clear. Something unimaginable had been witnessed, and Graves feared that it was no longer possible to turn back. His journal was found floating among the wreckage of a ship that, according to official records, was never supposed to sink. The Fortuna, a massive warship considered invincible, disappeared without a trace on a day of clear skies and calm seas. For weeks, the world believed it was yet another victim of the violent storms that ravaged the waters of the Atlantic. But when the journal was found, the truth became more terrifying than any hurricane. Captain Graves described a vision that no man in his right mind could conceive. In his words, a creature so colossal that its presence seemed to distort the very space around it appeared on the horizon. The first thing that was noticed was the tremor, something so deep it seemed to emanate from the Earth's very core. The sky, Graves said, folded above them, as if it were being pressed by an immense force, and the sea retreated, as if the ocean itself feared what was approaching. The creature, which he called the Shadow of Eternity, was indescribable, a twisted mass of forms that could not be compared to anything known to the human eye. It was a monstrosity that moved with a terrifying fluidity, its parts extending and contracting as if they were made of water, but with a solidity that shattered any understanding of the natural. The captain described, amidst the dragged verses of the journal, a sense of absolute insignificance, as if existence itself was a fallacy in the face of it. Graves' words began to recount the growing panic among the crew, many of whom fell into a state of hysteria as they saw the enormous shadow approaching, emerging from the depths with a macabre patience. One by one, the men lost their sanity, and many leaped into the sea, unable to bear the sight of something that defied all logic. At the end of his account, with the last vestiges of lucidity, Graves wrote, "The sea receded, but the creature did not go away. And we are only the flesh it left behind. If the sea ever retreats again, it will be the end, and there will be no more ships to sail. There is no salvation." The last page of the journal was partially torn, as if he had tried to write more. But time and terror had interrupted his writing. The journal was found, but the Fortuna was never located. The wreckage that floated in the waters belonged to a ship that should never have sunk, a ship that, according to legends, possessed the strength to survive the most violent battles. Yet, the remnants of that day in 1797 spoke of something much older and much more powerful than any man or ship. What happened to Captain Graves and his crew remains a mystery. But in the words that remained, the most terrifying question is, if the creature is still there, waiting at the bottom of the waters, what else might awaken when the sea retreats again? I saw the sea open, not metaphorically, like a mouth, like a living crack, enormous, that opened before us, swallowing everything in its path. It was so fast that no one had time to understand, nor to react. It was as if nature itself were tearing apart, showing a face that should never have been seen. The ocean, which once was vast and mysterious, split relentlessly, as if it had a life of its own, a will we could not comprehend. The lights went out immediately, as if the light itself were being sucked into the crack that was forming. The ship, which had been floating calmly on the water moments before, now seemed small and insignificant in the face of it. The sails wilted, and the wind stopped. Everything around us turned to shadows and darkness. The sound of the sea, normally unmistakable and constant, was lost, and what remained was an absolute silence, dense and oppressive. The screams began to echo but soon ceased, as if the very air had been drained. There was no longer the sound of fear, of anguish, of panic. It was as if, suddenly, the world had fallen silent, unable to process the horror unfolding before us. Those who could still breathe seemed in a trance, as if their minds had been disconnected from reality. There was no more movement, no more hope, only that abyss opening with cruel patience, waiting for everything to be swallowed. And then, the silence. A silence that cut deeper than any scream, deeper than any roar of a storm. It was a silence that didn't seem natural, as if the entire universe were waiting, suspended, watching something that should never have been witnessed. It dragged on, thick, as if nature itself had stepped back and left us facing something that was beyond our understanding. The sea had opened, and whatever was down there, waiting, patiently waiting for its time, now had the freedom to reveal itself. But there was no revelation, only the crack, the darkness, and the silence that tore us apart. I saw the sea open, and nothing was the same after that. It is immense, but it is not just flesh. The Leviathan is something beyond what any human being could comprehend. It is not merely a sea monster, not simply a creature of water and muscle. It is made of memory, salt, and darkness, a fusion of elements that transcend the laws of the visible world. Its scales, which cover its body like plates of gleaming obsidian, are not just protective, but act as portals, fragments of a forgotten past and shattered destinies. Each scale seems to contain faces, faces of men and women, entire crews, who were lost in the endless abyss, faces that writhe in an expression of eternal pain, as if the Leviathan devours souls along with the ships that succumb to its immensity. With each undulation of its colossal body, a wave of lament seems to echo, as if it absorbs not just flesh, but the very spirit of those who dared approach its waters. The Leviathan is not merely a predator of the sea, but a collector of stories, a guardian of forgotten mysteries, who swallows those who seek its secrets. Each ship that disappears into the depths, each boat swallowed by the dark waters, becomes part of it, consumed not only physically but spiritually. The sea becomes its territory, and the echoes of past victims merge with its scales, forever trapped within its monstrous flesh. When it emerges from the depths, it is not just a monster revealed, but an ancient force, a living reminder of a time when the ocean was not a place of exploration, but a kingdom ruled by something greater and older. The Leviathan is the past, the present, and the future of the sea, an entity that transcends the simple concept of a living being, carrying the weight of all the stories that were forgotten by the waves, and holding the secrets of all the souls it has consumed. It is immense, but its true greatness lies in what it carries with it, a deep sea made of darkness, memory, and salt, where the lost souls continue to sail, forever trapped within its scales. Survivors whisper about the sunken city, a place that stretches beyond the depths of the ocean, where the Leviathan rests. It is not a city like the ones we know, with streets and squares. No, that city is a labyrinth of black coral and impossible structures, buildings that seem to grow from the very water, distorted by time and darkness. The corals, twisted and poisonous, are more than mere marine organisms. They are the veins of something much larger, much older, something that breathes in the shadowy depths. The few who survived this vision speak of nightmares, echoes of a lost civilization that existed long before man reached the shores of the world. They say the walls of the city curve unnaturally, as if space and time have been twisted by the will of an entity far beyond human understanding. There are arches that rise to infinity, and columns that stretch into the depths of the abyss, all made of the same black coral, with a texture that seems to pulse as if it were alive. And the eyes are everywhere, peering from within the corals, in the cracks of the stones, in the corners where light never reaches. There are millions of them, fixed on the void, watching in a deadly silence. These eyes do not blink. They do not move, but they know. They know everything, and somehow they know about you. With each gaze, with every crack where the darkness breaks, a pair of eyes seems to follow your movements, as if calculating every step, every breath. One of them saw me. It was when the waters opened, when the sea stirred in a silent agony. I was alone, swimming in the depths, trying to escape the city that was crumbling around me. But then, between the broken reefs and fallen columns, I saw it. A pair of eyes, large and motionless, but with such a powerful presence that it paralyzed me. They were not the eyes of a fish, nor any known creature. They were human eyes, but distorted by the darkness of the sea. Eyes that seemed to reflect centuries of suffering, of lost memories, of horrors that should never have been revived. I tried to move, tried to swim away, but there was no escape. The gaze pierced through me, entering my soul like a cold spear. I knew it had seen me, that it had been watching me from the start. And in that moment, an overwhelming sense of weight took hold of me, as if I were now part of the city, as if the black corals and the eyes fixed on the void had claimed me. I don't know if I escaped, or if what happened to me was just a dream, an illusion created by my terrified mind. But to this day, I feel the eyes watching me. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see them clearer than ever, fixed, empty, waiting. And I know, deep inside me, that they are watching me, waiting for the moment when I will be just another part of the sunken city. The currents change when it moves, not in a natural way, like the tide that rises or recedes, but with an inexplicable violence, as if the sea itself were being torn and reconfigured with every step it takes. The waters twist, churn, and the sound of the surface becomes a cacophony, a battle of forces that do not belong to this world. The ship fights against these currents, but it is useless. It is pulled and pushed, as if an invisible hand were manipulating it, driving it mercilessly toward an inevitable fate. The compasses go mad. Their needles spin frantically, unable to point to any direction. North, south, east, west, all lose their meaning. What was once a certainty, a guide, is now just a useless game of imprecision. The sailors look to the skies, trying to find guidance in the stars, but the sky, like the sea, seems distorted, indecipherable. The lines of orientation disappear before a horizon that cannot be touched, cannot be reached, as if the entire world had suddenly forgotten where it was. And the fish disappear. A strange, silent phenomenon. Where schools of fish once swam peacefully, now there is only emptiness, an absence that spreads like a shadow. The ocean, usually vibrant with life, becomes a desert. No more leaping sea creatures, the shimmer of sardine schools, or the swift movements of predators. They simply vanish, as if the sea knew that something terrible was about to happen, as if it were making one last effort to escape from a presence that fills it with terror. It's as if the entire sea knows, as if the whole ocean were trying to warn in a language only it understands, a murmur in the waves, a brushing in the tides, a whisper in the wind. It is pulling away, distancing itself from something or someone that frightens it, that forces it to abandon its own laws, its own rules. The sea in its immensity has never seemed so small, so vulnerable, as if it were only a reflection of something greater, something capable of bending it, making it bow before an immense and insatiable will. The currents, the compasses, the fish. All of this is a warning, a clear but incomprehensible sign. Something is coming. And no matter how much we try to ignore it, no matter how much we try to continue, the ocean is trying to tell us what we know, deep in our bones. Something terrible, something we should never have seen, is approaching from the depths. The currents change when it moves. It is not a natural change. There is no predictability of tides or the calm course of the waters. It's as if the ocean itself were twisting, rearranging itself to avoid something, or perhaps to contain something that shouldn't be there. The waters, once serene, become violent and unpredictable. Each wave seems to pull in opposite directions, as if the sea were trying to escape a threatening fate. The compasses go mad. The needles, once firm, now dance frantically, spinning aimlessly, without purpose. No matter how much one tries to adjust them, they refuse to point to any fixed direction. North, south, east, west, everything loses meaning. The sky, usually a safe guide, also becomes a vastness without reference, as if the very firmament were distorting. Immersed in the chaos of what is approaching, nothing seems right anymore. Nothing makes sense. And the fish disappear. The schools, once dense and colorful, simply vanish, as if the ocean had swallowed all the submerged life. The sea, which was always filled with pulses, movement, and life, becomes a deep, unsettling emptiness. The reefs, usually vibrant with marine life colors, turn into desolate, cold, silent places. Something in the sea, something within the waters, caused everything to flee, as if the ocean itself knew that the worst was yet to come. It's as if the entire sea knows, as if, in its immensity, it were trying to warn us, trying to alert those who dare to navigate its waters. The wind doesn't blow as it did before. The salt doesn't smell the same. Every wave that crashes on the shore seems to carry with it an indecipherable message, a muffled cry from centuries of silence. The ocean, in its vastness, has never seemed so small, so vulnerable before a greater force, something that threatens it and corrodes it from within. The sea does not lie. It senses the presence of what approaches, and it warns us, in all the ways it knows, so we can understand, so we can prepare. But no matter how much we try, no matter how much we search for answers, we still cannot decipher the warning it gives us. And whatever is coming, the sea already knows there is no escape. It has already prepared for what is to come. And somehow it watches us, in silence, waiting for the storm to unfold. It is not just a monster. It is something beyond flesh and bone, something that transcends physical fear and enters the realms of the supernatural. It is worshipped. It is an entity, a being that dwells in the shadows of the sea, as ancient as the waters themselves. It is not merely a beast to be defeated or a creature to be feared. It is a force, a presence that weaves itself into the legends and rituals of those who dare to live near the deep ocean. In coastal villages, where the wind carries more than just salt and the tide whispers forgotten secrets, there are ancient prayers. Prayers lost in forgotten tongues, in sounds that echo like a distant memory of a time before the world was the world. They say the elders, those whose bones have already bowed under the weight of the years, still know how to calm it. They do not speak of it openly, not anymore, for the eyes of the younger generations would never understand. But there are moments, on the darkest nights, when the sea seems to breathe differently, that the elders gather silently near the horizon where the water meets the sky. There, in a language that seems to fade away into the waves, they whisper words that carry the power of a forgotten time, words that, they say, have the power to quell the fury of the being that rests in the depths. Some say it is not a mere negotiation, but something more ritualistic. They do not ask the beast to leave. That would not be possible. Instead, the elders make a pact, a silent exchange between worlds. The calmness of the tide, the soft breath of the wind, the glow of the stars reflected in the waters, all of this is at stake. They know it is impossible to control what dwells in the depths, but, in some way, they can negotiate. It is known that it, the monster, is not interested in simple victims. It does not come for flesh. It comes for something deeper, something more essential. And it is on this that the elders base their rituals. When the sea is calm, when the sun begins to disappear over the horizon and the moon rises, that is when the most powerful prayers are spoken. Some say that, in their words, there is an invitation. Others believe there is a plea, a recognition that the ocean is a place where one must respect not only what is visible, but also what lies beyond human understanding. Perhaps that is what keeps the monster distant. Perhaps it is what makes it return to the depths, where it remains until the balance is disturbed again. But what no one speaks of is the price of the negotiation. For like all entities that govern the mysteries of the world, It demands something in return, something that cannot be given back, something that, once offered, cannot be withdrawn. And so, in the coastal villages, whenever the sea calms after a period of terror, there is a furtive glance, a silence laden with a collective awareness. They know that behind the peace, there is always the risk of a new storm, and perhaps something even more terrible, waiting in the shadows of the deep waters. In 1945, a military submarine on a secret mission in the Atlantic reported something that no man should ever witness. They called it the shadow, something immense, something that moved in the depths, not with the haste of a predator, but with the patience of an ancient presence. For 3 days, this shadow followed the submarine. According to the records, there was no sound, no tremors. It was just the sensation, an invisible weight in the waters, as if the very essence of the sea had bent to follow them. On the first day, the officers thought it was a sonar malfunction, a distortion of the equipment. On the second day, fear began to spread among the crew. Each patrol reported a strange movement in the depths, something too large to be any known marine animal, something that moved with unsettling precision. On the third day, no one questioned what they were feeling anymore. Silence took over the submarine. The tension was palpable. The men who had once been confident in their training and the mission were now in a state of absolute alert, as if the very sea was watching them. The radio was broken. The communication system was malfunctioning. No more words could be exchanged with the surface. And then, suddenly, as if something had decided that it was time, the sound disappeared. There was no crash, no collision. It was as if the sea, for some reason, had swallowed the vessel and the crew in absolute silence. When the submarine was finally found, there were no visible signs of damage. There was no struggle, no traces of destruction. But what they found, upon opening the hatch, was more disturbing than any injury. The ship was sealed from the inside, the doors and compartments locked, as if the men who had been there had tried to keep something out. Or perhaps more terrifying still, had tried to keep something in. There were no bodies. There were no signs of life. The submarine was empty, empty of any sound, any breath, as if the entire crew had been consumed, absorbed by the abyss they were in, as if they had been left behind, forgotten by the very waters that had followed them. No one spoke of what happened anymore. The documents were classified, the records erased, and the incident became a shadow, a distant memory muffled by the fog of time. But those who knew the story, those who heard the whispers among the retired officers, knew that there was something much deeper in the waters than could ever be explained. Something that follows, patiently, waiting. And what happened on that submarine was not just a lost mystery, but a warning. Some things in the sea should never be sought. In a small Scottish village, isolated between the hills and the wild coast, there was an old church, worn by the wind and the salt of the sea. Its altar, simple and imposing, was adorned only by a single peculiar image, a figure of indescribable shape, made of shells and bones. The shells were irregular, of different sizes, as if they had been gathered from distant and dark beaches. The bones, pale in color, did not belong to any common animal. Some were human, others from marine creatures that could not be easily identified. The image, though grotesque at first glance, had a strange and powerful presence. The priest who led the congregation, a man with a weary appearance and deep eyes, kept this image on his altar for decades. He never explained where it came from, nor how it was made. Whenever anyone approached to ask, he simply said, "As long as it is here, he sleeps." No further details, no story, no explanation. The answer was always given with a distant look, as if the priest was merely performing a ritual, a silent obligation, and had no time for anything else. Many in the village began to speak about it, as if the image had a silent power that transcended the limitations of human reason. They said that when it was on the altar, the sea remained calm, storms never came near the shore, and even the winds, normally unpredictable and fierce, would calm. But when the image was moved or when someone dared to touch it, the tranquility dissipated. The sea roared, the winds howled as if something was waking from the depths. Some of the older villagers, who had lived longer and heard more stories than they could tell, whispered about an ancient entity, a presence that inhabited the depths of the ocean. They believed that the image was not just a work of art, but a key, a symbol to keep something trapped in the waters. Something that, if awakened, would bring desolation, chaos, and death to the land. The priest, with his serious and cold expression, knew this. He knew that, as long as the image remained there, the being asleep in the depths of the sea would continue to rest. But the image was growing old, and the shells that formed its surface began to wear down. The bones, once rigid, were starting to weaken, as if time itself was demanding a price. And as the years passed, some people began to question, to wonder what would happen if one day the image were destroyed or taken away. On a stormy night, when the wind seemed to scream and the sea battered furiously against the rocks, the priest, now elderly, was finally found alone at the altar. His gaze was empty, lost, as if something was out of his reach. Beside him, the image of shells and bones had disappeared, and in the sky, the thunder sounded like a distant roar, while the sea, which had always been so calm, began to stir violently, as if something had been freed from the depths. No one knows exactly what happened that night. Some say the priest made the final sacrifice. Others believe the image was no longer needed, that the being asleep had finally awakened. But whatever the truth, one thing became clear. As long as it is there, he sleeps. And when it is no longer, the sea will never be still again. On the long winter nights in the small Icelandic village, where the sun hides for weeks and the stars seem to merge with the snow, something strange began to happen. The children, for no apparent reason, started drawing the same figure. It wasn't an image anyone had taught them, nor a story told by the fireside. It was something that appeared spontaneously, on sheets of paper, on the walls of bedrooms, even in the snow. The figure was always the same, thick, twisted tentacles, as if made from something heavier than the sea, sharp and grotesque teeth, and at the center, an eye, too large, inhuman, surrounded by waves that seemed to move even when still. It was a simple drawing, but it carried a disconcerting presence, as if it was more than just an image. It was a message, a warning, or perhaps a summoning. The children never spoke about what they drew, but their empty eyes and distant expressions were more than enough for those who watched them. Something connected them to this creature, something they could not comprehend, but that they felt in their bones, in their gut. Gradually, other signs began to emerge. The children seemed to have nightmares, but not the usual kind. They would wake up in the middle of the night, their eyes wide open, murmuring words that no one could understand. Some of the older ones said they were simply imitating what they saw in their dreams, but the more skeptical couldn't ignore the coincidence. When a child described their nightmare, all the stories were the same. The stormy sea, the creature with tentacles, the sharp teeth, and the eye, that eye. Always the same. The strange phenomenon wasn't limited to just the drawings and dreams. As the months went by, the children seemed more connected to the sea, to something that hid in the depths, waiting patiently until the time came. They would gather near the shore, where the waves broke on the rocks, as if they were waiting for something, or perhaps waiting for someone. The adults tried to pull them away, but they always returned, drawn by a force they could not understand. The elders, with their wrinkled skin and tired eyes, began to remember old stories that many had forgotten. They spoke of an entity that lived in the deep waters, something that existed long before the people arrived on the island. Some called it the shadow of the sea, others, the eye of the abyss. It was a creature as ancient as the frozen lands of Iceland itself, a primordial force that fed on the dreams and fears of living beings. It has always been there, they said, and now, it seems, it wants the children to see it. The children, not knowing why, continued to draw the figure. More and more, their eyes became empty, as if a part of them was already lost to the sea, to that invisible and intangible being. The village, once calm, became a place of unease, with the adults gathering, whispering, trying to understand what was happening. But no one had answers. What they knew was that something was awakening, something that hid in the waves, in the submerged caves, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The last child to draw the figure was a girl named Freya. She was only 7 years old, but her eyes were deeper than any child of her age. She drew the monster with unsettling serenity, as if she recognized it, as if she had known it for a long time. When her parents tried to ask her about the drawing, she simply looked at the sea with a distant gaze and said, "He's already coming." And on the following night, the storm arrived. The wind howled like an ancient scream, and the sea seemed to swallow the shore. The next morning, the village was empty. There were no signs of struggle, no signs of destruction, only the echo of the water receding, leaving behind a deep silence, as if the entire world had been swallowed by an immense and invisible force. And in the sky, the only sound left was the whisper of the wind. The children, with their drawings and their dreams, had called something they couldn't understand. And now, the creature that had waited in the depths of the sea, with tentacles, teeth, and an eye surrounded by waves, had answered. The sound of the Pacific, known as the Bloop, was not a technical malfunction, as many wanted to believe. It wasn't an anomaly in the equipment or an error in the sensors. On the contrary, what we captured at that moment was a vocalization, a sound deep and deafening that emerged from the depths of the ocean. Something so large, so immense, that it seemed to come from a part of the world where no form of human life could reach. It wasn't a noise caused by ice breaking or a known natural phenomenon. No, it had the cadence of an intention, of a communication. The original recording, made in 1997, was something that left scientists perplexed. The sound, with its underwater frequencies and growing intensity, seemed to come from a colossal creature, something beyond any marine being ever cataloged. For years, it was considered a failure, perhaps a technical glitch, caused by a moving iceberg or some unknown submarine movement. But as time passed, theories began to emerge. Some, bolder ones, suggested that the bloop was not just a sound of natural origin, but a manifestation of something alive, perhaps an entity as old as the ocean itself. And now, according to the latest data, the call has not only not ceased, but it is repeating. Every few months, a new recording surfaces, captured by sonars and hydrophones scattered throughout the Pacific. The pattern, though still mysterious, is unmistakable. The intensity of the sound is increasing, as if the being responsible for it is drawing closer or moving more freely through the waters. It's like an echo from the depths, a call that cannot be ignored. And this time it's not an isolated sound. It is becoming a frequency, something recurring, that seems to follow its own rhythm. The scientists, now more concerned than fascinated, are starting to question what is truly behind this phenomenon. Is something gigantic, unknown to us, emerging from the abyss? Could it be a creature the size of a continent, with a vocalization so powerful that it resonates through the ocean layers at a range that we, humans, can barely comprehend? What is even more unsettling, however, are the implications of this. The sound of the bloop is not just a scientific curiosity. It's a communication, a message from a presence that inhabits a place that does not belong to our world. If this sound is indeed a vocalization, a call from some entity or creature, what is it trying to say? And why now? What lies at the bottom of the Pacific, in places where light has never reached and now seems to be making itself heard? Each new recording brings more questions than answers. And while the waves of the sea continue to send their echoes to the world, the bloop keeps repeating its call, louder and clearer, like a warning or a summoning, something that transcends the limit of what we know about the depths. The waters hold ancient secrets, secrets that time may never allow us to understand. And every time that sound invades our equipment, we are reminded that perhaps we should never underestimate what resides in the darkest places of the planet. The stars align in cycles, a silent dance that transcends the millennia. The ancients, with their deep wisdom and connection to the cosmos, understood something that many of us have forgotten. They knew that the sky was not just a distant ceiling, but a map, a guide that repeated in unchanging patterns. They kept their celestial maps, written on aged parchments, carved into stones, and passed down through memories from generation to generation. And in these maps, there were marks. Marks that pointed to more than just constellations and planets. They pointed to the oceans, to the deep seas, where the sky seemed to descend and merge with the water, where the cosmos and the depths of the earth touched, and where, they said, secrets were kept by ancient forces. These celestial maps were not merely a form of navigation, but a form of prediction. They indicated when the time was right, when the stars formed the exact pattern necessary for something to happen, something great, something that, according to the oldest texts, would occur when the stars aligned in a specific way, something that could open doors, reveal hidden paths, or perhaps bring to the surface what had been kept buried in the depths for eons. And 2025, some say, is the year of the opening. Whispers about this began to spread among scholars, mystics, and those who study the sky and the sea, the astrological cycles, the alignment of planets, the passing of comets. Everything seems to converge on this year, as if somehow everything had been orchestrated since the most ancient times, as if humanity was about to be reminded of something forgotten, something that had been hidden in the waters and the stars. But what exactly will open? Will it be a physical portal, a rift between worlds, where the sea will open to reveal something that has been sealed for ages? Or will it be something more metaphysical, a perception that will allow us to see beyond what our eyes can reach? Something that will transform our understanding of the universe and our relationship with it? Some claim that the opening is a chance to uncover a secret hidden in the depths of the sea, something the ancient peoples knew but was lost over time. Others speak of a reunion with beings that inhabit the seas and the cosmos, a kind of ancestral connection that was interrupted with human evolution. And there are those who believe that 2025 will mark the beginning of a new era, where the stars and oceans, with their unfathomable mysteries, will align to bring forth a power so great that it will change the course of history. However, no matter what the truth behind this belief may be, one thing is certain. Humanity is about to face a unique moment. The stars are aligning, and with them, the veil between the known and the unknown grows thinner. The year of the opening is approaching, and when it arrives, what will be revealed? Only time and the stars will be able to tell us. I dreamed of him before I ever saw him. Wet, drowning dreams, where the air disappeared and the water enveloped me, cold and relentless. It wasn't just any water, but something denser, deeper. I saw myself being pulled into the abyss, to the center of a sea that had no end. The sensation of sinking was constant, as if the ocean was slowly consuming me, while at the same time keeping me alive, as if I were a part of it, a piece in a puzzle that was never meant to be completed. In my dreams, I never died. I sank, yes. I sank with a slowness that seemed eternal, without screaming, without fighting. The water surrounded me, and I surrendered, knowing that something awaited down below, something that called to me, something that wanted me. And then I saw his gaze. Sometimes it was a glimpse in the depths of darkness. Other times he was right in front of me, with those eyes. Not human eyes, not eyes of any known being. They were large, ancient, filled with a depth that seemed to reflect the very abyss. They watched me, fixed, and I knew there was no escape. I didn't know what he was, but I knew he saw me. I knew he wanted to see me, to pull me deeper. It was a feeling of inevitability, of being drawn by something greater than me, greater than the sea itself. These dreams began to repeat, more and more intense, more and more real. With each new dream, I felt less fear, less resistance. I didn't want to wake up. I wanted to sink, go deeper, get closer to that gaze, understand what he wanted from me. It was as if, being swallowed by that liquid vastness, I was finally finding something that I had been missing, something hidden in the depths that only he could reveal. When I saw him for the first time, it wasn't in the sea. It was in a place that could not be touched by light, a space between the real world and the unknown. He appeared before me, but not in a physical form. It was more like a presence, a sensation in every cell of my body. His gaze, still, was what marked me the most. Those eyes, with all their vastness, seemed to reflect not just the ocean, but the entire universe, and something inside me recognized that vision. I knew I had already known him. I knew I had been with him in my dreams. There were no words between us. He didn't need to speak. The gaze said everything. And I, in my vulnerability, knew that this was only the beginning. I didn't know if I would sink to the end, or if I would leave that place. But one thing was certain. In that moment, I knew I had been waiting for him. And in some way, he was waiting for me too. After the mission, I began to draw compulsively. At first, it was just a scribble, an attempt to organize the thoughts that were racing in my mind. But soon it became something uncontrollable. The symbol always the same, a circle surrounded by teeth. I didn't know what it meant, didn't know where it came from, but when my hands took the pen, it was as if it was the only thing I could do. The circle, the teeth, the incessant repetition. It was like a force taking over me, an uncontrollable need to draw, to record, to mark something on the paper, as if I were trying to understand something deep, something that couldn't be expressed any other way. My wife left soon after. She watched me with a mix of concern and fear, as if I were someone she no longer recognized. At first, she tried to understand. She asked several times what was happening to me, if I needed help, if there was anything she could do. But as the days passed and the drawings piled up, she began to distance herself. I could see in her eyes a shadow of fear. I couldn't explain it. I didn't know how. But she started avoiding me. She spent more and more time away until, eventually, she didn't come back. My friends also distanced themselves. Some tried to reach out to ask how I was, but the conversations never went anywhere. When we talked, I felt that they couldn't see the person I used to be. They only saw a shadow, an empty reflection of something that used to be familiar. They asked about work, about the mission, but I couldn't talk about it. The words got stuck, as if what I really wanted to say was something that couldn't be put into words. I could only draw. I could only keep marking the paper. And as time went on, the obsession grew. The symbol wouldn't stop haunting me. Every time I closed my eyes, it was there, glowing in my mind, as if it had been imprinted on my soul. The circle surrounded by teeth. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew I couldn't escape it. It was as if the symbol itself had a power, a presence, as if it were trying to tell me something, but I couldn't understand. And with every new drawing, every new repetition, the pressure grew. The silence at home became unbearable. The loneliness swallowed me slowly. With each drawing, with every line I made, I felt like I was drifting further away from everything I once knew. I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know what was happening to me. But somehow, I knew the symbol was in control. That it, in some way, was the key to something much bigger, something I couldn't understand. But that was now a part of me. And so, I continued. I kept drawing, without stopping, because deep down, I knew there was no other choice. I sent everything to the Oceanographic Institute, all the reports, the drawings, the recordings, everything I could gather, everything I knew. At that moment, I still believed there was a rational explanation, some way to convince science that what I had seen, what I had felt, wasn't just the result of my disturbed mind. But the response came in silence. They ignored me. As if the data I had provided were insignificant, as if what I was trying to communicate was just another absurd story, a baseless theory. But yesterday, something changed. A letter arrived, with no return address, no identification, except for a strange seal I had never seen before. It was a simple letter, made of aged paper, with a firm but trembling handwriting. I knew this wasn't ordinary. It wasn't a mistake. It was intentional. I opened it with the feeling that something was about to be revealed, something I had been expecting, but at the same time, fearing. The letter simply said, "You saw him. We did too. He has awoken." Those words paralyzed me. I read and reread them, trying to understand what they meant. How did someone know what I had witnessed? How did they know what I had experienced, what still haunted me every night, in my nightmares and in the moments when the silence was too deep? How did they know I saw him? The sea, the waves, the emptiness of the abyss, the gaze. That gaze that watched me, that pulled me down, that enveloped me with a presence as dense as the ocean itself. I didn't know what it was, but I knew I wasn't alone. And now, these words confirmed what I had feared. Others knew. They had seen it too. And worse, whatever it was, it had awoken. What had been silent for so long, what had been hiding in the depths, was now beginning to move. And someone, somewhere, was aware of it. It wasn't just my recordings, it wasn't just my drawings. Others were watching, perhaps more closely, perhaps more deeply than I ever would have had the courage to go. The letter didn't contain instructions, didn't contain explanations. Just those words, which echoed in my mind. He has awoken. And in that moment, reality seemed to distort around me. What happened in the sea, what I saw, what he is, all of that was no longer something isolated. It was bigger, deeper, older than I had imagined. And now it was spreading, becoming known. Whoever sent this letter, whatever they knew, one thing was clear. What we saw was no accident, and the creature that, until now, had been confined to the shadows of the ocean, was now awakening. I don't know what to do anymore, or where to go. But I know that the answer I have been searching for so long is closer than I imagined. And no matter how much I want to ignore it, I know he won't leave me in peace. I am not the only one. There are others like me, others who somehow also feel the call. They are there, in the shadows, waiting, watching the tides, listening to the sounds from the depths of the sea. They know that something hides in the depths, something that watches us, that knows us in a way we do not understand. They too have been touched, like me, by that which is beyond what our eyes can see, beyond what our minds can comprehend. The difference, however, is that I will return there. I cannot stay still. I need to understand. I need to remember. Something inside me pulls me to the abyss, as if I am destined to go back to that place, to the depths where it all began. With every passing tide, with every night of silence, the desire grows. The need to return becomes stronger, as if something is waiting for me, as if I am already part of that world, as if the ocean has marked my soul. I know it's not just curiosity. It's not merely an insane impulse, a search for easy answers. It's something deeper, something I cannot explain in words. I am not just drawn to the unknown, I am called by it. And even though fear tries to hold me back, even though doubt gnaws at me, I know that the only way to understand what I saw, what I felt, is by going back. Returning is the only way to clear the fog that clouds my mind, to fill the emptiness left after that vision, that gaze, marked me. I can no longer ignore it. There are others like me, I know. Some have already descended. Others like me still wait. But I will be the next. I will return to the depths, where the sea and the darkness meet, where sounds become more than sounds, where the gaze of something watches us, knows us, waits for us. I cannot live without this answer. I cannot live without understanding what it is, what it means. I know that what is there is ancient. It is vast. It is more than anything that can be told or explained. And no matter how much fear paralyzes me, no matter how much the warning words echo in my mind, I know I must return. I must find what is waiting for me in the depths because, in the end, I already belong to it. And when I return, maybe I will finally understand what this force is, this presence. Or maybe I will never fully understand. But I know my destiny is there, and somehow it is also waiting for me. And if you are hearing this, it's because I found something. Or, more likely, because it found me again. And this time, it's rising. The tides have changed, I felt it. Something in the air, something in the water, something that was trapped down there, in the depths, is now moving with a different force, a force that cannot be ignored. It's no longer a distant whisper, no longer the echo of an ancient nightmare. Now, it's real. I can feel it, I can hear it, I can even see it. What I found, or what it showed me, I'm not sure anymore, is not something that can be explained in simple words. I went down there. I returned to the depths where it all began, where the sea opens like a black mouth, where the darkness seems to devour the light. I heard that sound again, that call that is not just a vibration in the air, but something that penetrates your bones, that alters the rhythm of your heart. And when I got there, to the edge of what I could endure, I saw what was waiting. It was there, in that vast expanse, like a shadow stretching further than the horizon allows. But now, it's no longer down there. Not anymore. It's rising. I can feel the pressure of the water change, the movement of the sea, as if something immense is approaching, breaking the layers of silence, of darkness. The cycle, the tides, everything is converging. It's coming. I don't know if there's time for more explanations. I don't know if what I'm saying now is enough. But what I do know is that if you are hearing this, if these words have reached you, then you need to prepare, because it's closer than you think. The abyss is no longer a distant place. It's at our door, and this time, there will be no ignoring it. The sea will no longer hide us. It's rising, stronger, faster, closer to us. I don't know what will happen next, but I know we can no longer escape. Whatever has awakened, whatever has been waiting, is now here. And the only thing I can do is warn you. Prepare yourself, because the abyss is rising and it's watching us.